This week was supposed to be the start of Donald Trump's federal election interference trial in Washington, D.C. But instead of proceedings in Judge Tanya Chutkan's courtroom on Monday, what we got was an expedited ruling by the Supreme Court saying states cannot remove Donald Trump from their ballots for engaging in insurrection under the 14th Amendment. And today, the court announced that it will hear oral arguments over Trump's presidential immunity claim 7 weeks from now, on April 25th, which is the very last day of the court's term. Joining me now is Sherrilyn Ifill, Endowed Chair in Civil Rights at Howard University. I should also note she filed an amicus brief in the Trump ballot case, which was, of course, recently decided by the court. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here in New York. I'm not going to ask you to tell me the good news because I think it's truly bad news here. The very last day of the court's term is when they're going to hear this immunity claim, contrasted with the relatively quick time frame for the 14th Amendment ruling. How do you interpret that decision?
It's very much consistent with this court's refusal to be moved from the narrative it has tried to create that we are somehow impervious to the politics of what's happening around us. And this is one of their ways of doing it, pretending that they don't understand the urgency, the reason why American voters would want to know whether one of the candidates for president has been convicted of a crime. And so what they do is they just carry on business as usual. And I suspect to their mind, they think that it is carrying forward a narrative of impartiality. They think that we are so deluded that we believe that they are just sticking to the timetable, sticking to the line, not letting politics move them. And we know that that is not true. We know that they can move quickly when they want to move quickly, and they move slowly when they want to move slowly. And so, you know, it's consistent with what they have demonstrated, but it's incredibly cynical.
Yeah. Oh, could I take it one step further and assign some more nefarious, nefarious ends to that, which is, you know, speeding up the decision on the 14th Amendment helped Trump. Slowing down the immunity claim helps Trump. I mean, there's a thread here that sort of makes sense if you look at it through a political lens.
Yeah, I don't think the way the Supreme Court has approached the timing of any of these cases suggests taking seriously how much their failure to acquiesce to the urgency of the moment itself undermines democracy and the electoral process. Yeah. And I think, you know, particularly with the 14th Amendment case coming the day before Super Tuesday, I mean, one might call that quick. I'm not sure that I would. I would say that their whole approach to that case showed a kind of laissez-faire at the oral argument. I've said they didn't sound prepared. They did the most cursory review of the history, which is why so much of it was wrong. I mean, there's just a lack of seriousness. And I think, Alex, I've said this before, the moment that we're in this country, which is a time of democratic crisis, requires us all to be big, you know, to be bigger than what we were and to meet the moment. And this court, the majority of this court is not prepared to meet the moment. They are scrabbling. Yeah. Even the fact that Clarence Thomas was part of the 14th Amendment decision, if you cared about our democracy, the integrity of the court, the legitimacy of decision-making, the conflicts abound. Yeah. And he should not have been part of that decision. But they can't help it. And then you see the ham-fistedness, right? It's a per curiam decision. No one wants to assign their name to it. There's the illusion that it's unanimous. I mean, I suppose it is unanimous, but it's not really. Right. You have the concurring justices who are like given the 1-2 punch and saying to me what has been the most serious, harsh, and I think not really given enough attention statement about what's going on with the majority on that court. And I will say nothing has shaken me as much as the language in that concurrence.
The suggestion that the conservative justices on the court are basically trying to shield future insurrectionists.
I can't even say suggestion. They said explicitly. The majority attempts to insulate all alleged insurrectionists from future challenges to their holding federal office. Attempts assigns intentionality to that majority. That should frighten all of us. We should be sitting with that people say, well, why didn't they dissent? I mean, I would have liked for them to dissent, at least dissent in part as well. But they are telling us in no uncertain terms, as clearly as they possibly. These are not wild-eyed folks. These are their colleagues on the court, and we have seen them try to toe the line, try to maintain relationships, try to be as careful as possible. And when they make a statement like that, if we refuse to pay attention to what they are telling us is happening on the court, that is on us, not on the majority. Even Amy Coney Barrett, the one conservative woman on the court, who, of course, tries to, scold the women by saying we shouldn't air our dirty laundry. But she says even she didn't think the decision had to go that far. The only reason she's telling us that is because they obviously were having conversations behind the scenes in which she, too, was hoping that the guys would be able to control themselves and restrain themselves enough to just issue the decision in the parameters in which they needed to. So you've got 4 women saying...
ringing the alarm bell loudly.
And we're all going on and saying, well, but it was 9-0 and it doesn't matter and this is not what's important. And anyway, it's, Section 3 and it's after the Civil War. And it's like, there is a bell ringing, folks, and they are telling us.
The other part of it that's so just profoundly hypocritical is this is the court that ruled in 2013 in Shelby County that Congress did not have the constitutional power under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment to enforce the Voting Rights Act.
Well,
and now in the same amendment, they're saying, oh, it's all up to Congress to enforce this part of it.
They said something a little different, but, with the same result in the Shelby County versus Holder case in 2013. What they did was exactly what they would do if Congress does pass a statute implementing Section 3, which was to say, not quite this way. Don't do it this way. Right? So Congress has a coverage formula for preclearance under the Voting Rights Act and reauthorizes that formula after hearings, after amassing evidence. And the Supreme Court says, no, we don't think that's right. Because we believe, as the court says in that case, the majority, that things have changed dramatically.
Yes, there's no racism anymore, Cheryl.
And now we see the stories in the papers this week, all of the studies that are being done that's showing that the turnout gap has increased again in those places where preclearance was removed. They don't know better. Congress does know better, which is why they have the power. So even when the court concedes that Congress has power, then they proceed to tell Congress how to use that power. In fact, in this decision,
in this one, too.
Right, they said it has to be legislation, and that legislation has to specifically say this and that, right? So it's a power grab in every way, and it is deference to Congress in name only. The 14th Amendment is one of, to my mind, the most important provision of our Constitution for the way we live our modern lives in this country, our post-Civil War lives. And to see this Supreme Court chip away at it, undermine it, subvert it, take it as their own. The times that happened in the past, in the 19th century, in the Reconstruction period, resulted in devastation for our democracy. Whether it was Plessy versus Ferguson, whether it was the civil rights cases in 1883, these were all circumstances in which the Supreme Court undermined Congress's power to issue statutes in accordance with the 14th Amendment. And every time they did it, I mean, they ushered in Jim Crow for 60 years in this country. So honestly, when we see the Supreme Court doing this, when we see them subverting a provision of the Constitution that those framers, the only framers in the history of this country who have looked insurrection in the eye and overcome it and stitched back together a broken nation, when we see them do this, we should understand this is an emergency moment for our democracy.
Yeah, and that emergency, we are going to talk in a coming block about just how crystal clear it is and how very much at our doorstep that emergency is. Sherilyn, please hang with me if you can for a few more minutes. Still
2020, Democrats stole the election from President Trump. The year before, they did it to me. Well, in 2024, President Trump is making a comeback, and so am I.
That was Mark Harris, Republican from North Carolina, who now has a second crack at a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. Harris won his first race for a House seat in 2018, but that victory was overturned when his campaign was accused of election fraud. That did not stop Mr. Harris yesterday from winning the Republican primary for North Carolina's 8th congressional district. North Carolina Republicans also chose this guy to be their nominee for governor, Mark Robinson, the state's lieutenant governor. He is known for denying the Holocaust and calling gay and transgender Americans filth. These are some of the down-ballot Republican nominees this year, not just bad candidates, not just fringe candidates. They are now accurate representations of what the party has become under Donald Trump. Back with me is Sherrilyn Ifill. Sherrilyn, thanks for sticking around. And it's so prescient of you to talk about the sort of fear that should be struck in all of our hearts that the liberal justices, the normies on the Supreme Court, are saying, we've just made it easier for insurrectionists to run for and hold federal office. I mean, when you look at these, how do you look at this crop of candidates who are likely to win House seats, maybe even governorships, in light of that decision that they've effectively made it easier for people who campaign violently against the United States to hold office?
Well, let's go back to the insurrection of 2020. You'll remember there were 10 members of Congress, actually 9 and 1 representative-elect. That was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had not yet taken her oath, who met with the president and others at the White House on December 21st, 2020, to talk about how they would try to overturn the election and to pressure Mike Pence. So I'm talking about Andy Biggs from Arizona. I'm talking about Andy Harris from Maryland. I'm talking about Matt Gaetz. I'm talking about Jim Jordan. All of those individuals took a deep sigh of relief after the Supreme Court's decision as well. These are people who had prior taken an oath and perhaps engaged or alleged to have engaged in the plans for that insurrection. So first of all, let's talk about those folks who essentially get a pass unless Congress passes some legislation through these very folks who are in Congress. Right? Exactly. And then you have a new crop of folks, right, who will be sworn in. The Congress will be sworn in before the president, before the electors all meet. So we will have a new Congress at that point, and so we will have people who have taken an oath. And what they decide to do should matter as well. So just think about the effect of this decision, which essentially says, unless Congress passes a statute that does all the things we say it has to do, and that statute holds up, that these kinds of folks are not barred by Section 3. This is so contrary to what the framers wanted, who were so concerned about the spirit of insurrection that they believed still existed in this country. They were not only concerned about the period after the Civil War, they wanted to protect this country forevermore. And this decision has essentially unraveled that and set us up for danger. I mean, if you're a democracy and you cannot protect yourself, and you can't protect yourself from those who would undermine you and from those who would unravel you, you're not worthy of the name. And we are seeing the tools taken out of our hands. You know, people say, well, just vote. Well, we're seeing, voting rights on the chopping block. So all the tools are being taken out of our hand that we need to protect our country. And that's what I find most alarming about this moment.
The other piece of it, independent of the insurrectionists sort of getting run of the inmates running the asylum, if you will, is the surge of Christian nationalism. And I focus here on Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, who very well may run the state. He, today, a video has resurfaced of Mark Robinson saying he wants to go back to when women couldn't vote. This is someone who's called homosexual, trans people filth. This is someone who believes that feminism was created by Satan. I mean, the injection of a theocracy, or the overlay of a theocracy onto a democracy, seems deeply problematic on a number of levels.
Well, and it's a perverted theocracy, of course, because I don't know who Mark Robinson thinks he would have been in 1919 before women could vote, but maybe he should ask those who were, in the East St. Louis race riots and race massacre. Maybe he should ask those who were in Tulsa. Maybe he should ask folks who were in Alabama and Mississippi during that period. The part that bothers me, Alex, is that we have a very rich tradition in this country of those who were associated with Christianity, who fought for social justice and change. These are the same people who will quote, albeit just one line from a speech, Dr. Martin Luther King. We think about the people. The civil rights movement was deeply and powerfully affected by people of faith, by, Reverend Shuttlesworth and C.T. Vivian, and all of these were people who deeply studied the Christian faith and who believed in the Christian faith and who were moved by it. And that tradition is part of our country as well. And so to see these people pervert a theology, it's not just that they're using theology, they're using their own theology, and they are perverting it to their aims in order to receive power. So I'm waiting for other Christian leaders to speak up in that other tradition that we have in this country and stand pat as well.
Preach is all I say. Sherrilyn Ifill, the great Sherrilyn Ifill, thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let me begin by asking a very simple question. Do we know the truth about what really happened in the 2020 election?
I think millions of Americans know something went wrong.
True the Vote has the largest store of election intelligence for the 2020 elections. We've identified more than 1,100 mules.
What is a mule?
Person picking up ballots and running them to the drop boxes.
This is organized crime.
That was a trailer for the election conspiracy propaganda 2,000 Mules. It was created by right-wing provocateur Dinesh D'Souza, and it's been widely cited by election deniers across the country as proof that the 2020 presidential election was stolen. In that trailer, you may have caught mention of an organization called True the Vote. That is a right-wing voter suppression group. 2,000 Mules is very upfront about the fact that the main source for their stolen election allegation is research by True the Vote. Now, True the Vote claimed that they had identified secret operatives, so-called mules, who were stuffing ballot boxes with votes. And the filmmakers suggest that that is proof of an election that was stolen for Joe Biden. The claims in that film have been widely discredited. And True the Vote has now been forced to admit in a court filing in Georgia that it had no evidence to back up its claims about ballot tampering there. So after that humiliating admission, you might think that anyone involved in the whole 2,000 Mules election conspiracy would, I don't know, retreat from public life. But you would be wrong. Yesterday, Republicans chose this man, Brandon Gill, to be their nominee for Texas's 26th congressional district. Brandon Gill is the son-in-law of the creator of 2,000 Mules, Dinesh D'Souza. And Gill was the film's main promoter when it premiered. That alone is an alarming example of where the Republican Party is right now, but it is even more shocking when you consider one of the other candidates Republicans chose to be their nominee yesterday. This is Mark Harris, a conservative pastor who ran for Congress in North Carolina back in 2018. And Mark Harris won that race in 2018, or at least that was how things appeared at first. Because after Election Day, everything changed.
Republican Mark Harris beat Democrat Dan McCready by only 905 votes. But instead of calling the race, officials launched a dramatic months-long investigation into allegations of absentee ballot tampering. Harris denied knowing about any wrongdoing. But just a day earlier, Harris's own son, John, a federal prosecutor, gave emotional testimony, revealing he warned his parents about the political operative they hired, Leslie McCrae Dowless, accused of running an operation that tampered with absentee ballots. Workers for Dallas say they were directed to forge signatures, collect blank or incomplete ballots, and even fill in votes.
North Carolina had to hold a brand new election after it was revealed that a Republican operative had helped steal that congressional race by running, wait for it, a ring of ballot harvesting mules. Yes, mules who collected ballots and filled them in for the Republican candidates and then mailed them in to be counted. In the end, scandal-plagued Mark Harris chose not to run in that do-over election, citing health issues. But there is no shortage of second chances in Republican politics. So yesterday, Republicans in North Carolina voted once again to make Mark Harris their nominee, this time in North Carolina's 8th congressional district. Harris is now claiming that that 2018 scandal was actually manufactured by Democrats to steal the election from him, because, of course, he's saying that. So to summarize, the guy who promoted the totally discredited ballot mule conspiracy is now a Republican nominee for Congress. And the guy who was tainted by the very real ballot mule election conspiracy, scandal, if you will, he is also now a Republican nominee for Congress. Both men are running in safe seats, and they will likely be elected to the U.S. House of Representatives this November.